Hi, everybody, and welcome to my next interview with Marcia. And I'm so excited to be here. So, we're talking about women's health in the workplace in alongside, so to say, Black History Month, and also it's International Menopause Month as well. And so, as you know, I'm having conversations throughout the whole entire month. And my guest today is Marcia Hilton, and she is the director at Life Inspired Wellness and a best-selling author. But that's not it all. Marcia, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Pamela, for inviting me onto your platform. So, I just a little bit about me. So, I'm actually a coach. I am a coach that supports women break free really from the patterns of toxic relationships, and I help them to create healthier new ones. And I do that using a trauma informed approach. So, it's about addressing that trauma and finding a way to be able to move past that. I'm also involved with helping organisations to become trauma informed as well, because we all have experienced trauma to some degree, whether we recognize it as that or not. And that actually can impact how we show up in the workplace, how we respond to whatever triggers we have within the workplace. So I think it's important that all organizations have some kind of knowledge about what that actually means, and for employees as well, because it's about all of us. Yeah.
Mm. That's interesting. I really want to go into that right now. Like how do we know that we're traumatized, or how does it sort of manifest in us?
Well, it can manifest in maybe anxiety and all the things that you talk about. Actually, it could manifest in physical health. So sometimes with our mental health, anxiety, we get triggered by certain things, um, and just how we're responding. It might be about our self-esteem, and how we view ourselves. So trauma can affect us on the physical. It can affect our physical health. It can affect our mental health. Yeah, it can affect the relationships that we have, not just within the workplace but outside of that as well. So trauma really, can affect every aspect of our lives, even how we deal with our finances, even. So it's quite broad. It
Mm.
affects ways that we wouldn't necessarily um, imagine. And I think the thing with trauma as well, I think people tend to think it's an event, a big event that's happened. So perhaps somebody, gets, maybe perhaps it's a car accident or something that you can sort of tangibly see, and you think, oh my gosh, that's a trauma. And it's what some people would refer to, and I like to say big T trauma. So it's things that you can actually see, that's a trauma that everybody would recognize as a trauma. But then you have all the little T traumas. So it's the little drip of everyday things that contribute to helping to dismantle our self-esteem, our mental health. And it's those little things that happen every day. So if somebody put you down at work, okay, or you've a horrible experience, that's another drip. It might be that somebody's not available for you emotionally, that's another drip. So, and over time these little drips build up and will have just as much impact on a person as the big T traumas.
Mm.
And that's why it's important that we recognize that trauma actually affects all of us.
Mm. That's so interesting, and I really want to go in a bit deeper with that, but I'm just going to say let's just pause for a moment, and we can come back to that. Yes, because that, in terms of women's health, Black History Month, the menopause, this is a really big topic,
Mm.
that I think that many people miss. And associate a lot of those symptoms that women experience as solely related to hormones. And so by the time a woman gets to her mid 40s and above, all of those things are layered in that
Mhm.
then at when the hormones are starting to shift, she can't actually manage those anymore and they kind of manifest in a much bigger way. So it's not just the changing hormones as she is in the perimenopause or postmenopause. It's life triggers like you just talked about. But I kind of want to talk about that a bit more in a bit and just learn more about you as a woman.
Mhm.
And so the question is when did you start your period?
Right. So I started my period around about the ages of, I think it was 11, 11. Yeah, it was 11, I think I was, yeah. And I remember that really clearly because my sister, my elder sister, she was a bit older than me. She's a couple of years older. And yeah, and I used to laugh at her when she was having her period. I used to go, you know, as a kid. And I remember going to the bathroom and thinking, what is that? You know? And I mentioned it to my sister and she said, oh, you started your period. Yeah, so I think she was about 14 at the time. Yeah. Yeah.
And what did your mum say anything about the period? Did she tell you what it was and everything?
Do you know, my mom was actually quite forward thinking when I look back on that time growing up, especially, you know, with Caribbean parents. Sometimes they're a bit more closed. They don't often, you know, always share. But my mum was really good, and so she was like, right, you know, she got down to it and explained what was happening to me, and you know, bought me my, you know, my stuff, you know, my sanitary towels and all of that. And so between her actually and my sister, my elder sister, it was, I guess when I look back on that, it was kind of managed well, you know. And I remember I used to get really, really bad stomach cramps with it as well. So
Mhm.
there were times when I didn't go to school and I'd be laying on the sofa, even at that age, and my
Yeah,
mum was boiling up some, you know, bush tea or something, you know, some let's get you some herbs, you know, she'd give me something to kind of ease it, and it used to be like, oh, I don't want to have it. But I remember that, you
yeah,
know, that she would boil up some tea, some form of tea, and give it to me to drink. Yeah.
yeah. That's hilarious, isn't it? Like they used to call it bush. It was like herbs. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So you had to take time off school because of painful periods. Were they heavy as well?
Sorry, I
Were they
missed that.
heavy too?
I had really heavy periods, yeah. And there were times when it would seep, you know, through my clothes, and you know, and I would, you know, have a stain on the back of my, you know. So I remember that was so embarrassing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they were really, really heavy right from early. Um, and I remember feeling sick with it as well sometimes.
Right.
Yeah,
And what
yeah.
was it like for your siblings and your mum? What were their periods like then?
I actually can't remember. I don't remember them having. You know, my sister just kind of, you know, all of my sisters actually just went ahead, you know, and just had their periods. I can't remember. I mean, all of us now as adults have had some form of gynecological issue, but
Mm,
but I don't actually, as a child, I can't remember, you know, hearing my mum say, "Oh, I'm ill with it." I do remember my mum having a hysterectomy.
right.
I heard my mum complain. I never heard my big sister complain. Um, they
Mm.
just do when I was in pain. Yeah.
Mm. And then so from school then to college and then university and then work, how was your painful periods and heavy period then? How did that impact those stages?
It impacted quite badly because as time went on, as I was getting older, the periods were coming heavier. They were coming longer. and kind of rolling it. I'd only have a small window of time where I wouldn't have a period, and then I'd be on again. And what I found was it got to the point as I was in work that for the first couple of days, maybe 3, I couldn't go anywhere because it was just a flood. So I'd have to take time out from work because I couldn't go to work because, you know, there was nothing I could do to stop the flow, and I didn't want to put myself in an embarrassing situation because I was forever on the loo,
Mm.
and that it was coming through, and not only that, I felt bad, the cramps. It just felt like it felt punishing. Yeah,
Mm.
I would take time out, and for the first couple of days, I wouldn't be able to go to work.
How did that how did work accept that? How old were you? And, how did that affect your attendance at work? Yeah.
I never told them it was because of my periods. I
Yeah.
would just ring in sick and just say I'm unwell. I can't come in today. Um, and yeah, I'm not quite sure how I managed to navigate that, but I genuinely couldn't. I mean, I was when I was nursing, I could, if it was on my days off anyway, then that would be fine.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was difficult trying to, and I don't think they were happy, because it was on a regular basis that I would
Mm,
be, you know,
absolutely.
some better than others, but on the whole, it was difficult for me to go anywhere. And there were times when I'd go see my GP, and I'd get a sick note if I needed to, to cover me for those days that I was off, or something to say that this is the reason why I'm off. And I don't think it went down that well, to be fair. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
How old were you then at that point?
I was in my mid-20s, my mid
Right. Okay.
20s, yeah. And I remember, because I have three children, well, three adult children now, and I remember after having my first child, um, that seemed, after that, it seemed to get worse, and I was having a lot of trouble, and I had it investigated,
Yeah.
and I remember it was really weird. I remember having these investigations and was told that I had endometriosis.
Hmm. I was going to
Um,
ask that
yeah,
whether you could. Yeah.
yeah. and and I remember them saying to me that if I wanted to have any more children, to do it now because the likelihood of me being able to, you know, well, my fertility would be severely affected, and that the ability to have any more children would be, you know, second to none, really. So and that was very frightening for me as well, because at the point, even though at that point didn't want any more, I had the one child. I wasn't really planning on having any more. Um, but when somebody tells you actually you might not be able to have any, that impacted, that hit different.
Mm.
It hit different because it was like it's one thing being able to control your own fertility, but then being told that you have no control over it was another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so, in terms of endometriosis, so because I was going to ask you, like, seriously, your symptoms as a young child, for me, was alarm bells are ringing. Yeah, in terms of endometriosis, and you know, I'm not sure how much do you know about endometriosis because it doesn't just stop as you. I mean, I don't know where you are on your hormonal journey, whether you're perimenopause or postmenopause, but it doesn't just stop. I just want to know, yeah, were you explained what it was and the effects of it?
Right. So even though I'm coming from a medical background, because I was a nurse, I wasn't gynecology wasn't my area, so I didn't know that much about it. What I remember them saying was that I had like these cysts, like these chocolate. They described it as chocolate cysts, that were kind of sticking all over my tubes. That's how it was explained to me. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what I knew, and that eventually, it was like on the was it on the outside of the wall of my womb? I can't quite remember, but it
Mm.
was that was kind of what I remember, and that there wasn't anything that they could do for it.
Mhm.
I mean, they basically, I mean, I went on and had two more children after that. But what they then said to me was that, there's nothing we can do. Do you want any more children? No, I don't actually. Right, let's just whip out your womb. So that's kind of what happened with me.
Right.
Uh, it was, and I was, by that time, I was 30, around about 35. So I had a hysterectomy because, again, the periods were just so ridiculous to the point where I would be vomiting right
Mm.
under, the first few days, and feeling so bad. And it was like I didn't want to feel like that anymore. But I kind of feel now, when I look back on that, I felt like, because I felt so bad, I just went with it. And when I look back, I think perhaps were there any other options available to me at that time? I felt almost like I wasn't able to make a fully informed choice because I
Mm.
didn't know what alternatives there were. I didn't think to ask that again. I think in hindsight, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So as you get older, you think, oh, had I realized this now, I probably wouldn't have had the hysterectomy, but it was what was offered as a solution, and there didn't seem to be anything else. Yeah.
Mm. So, I mean, obviously, endometriosis is getting a lot of attention now because it is, it's debilitating. And
Yeah.
how you manage to go through work and have time off on a monthly basis due to your period, I have no idea. You
Uh,
know, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you managed to do that and your GP was on your side in terms of helping you to have a sick note, so you were off work as a result of that.
It
But
wasn't, I have to say, it didn't go down well, you know,
right.
and it didn't go down well. And there were times when I did go to it, but often if I wasn't feeling, I genuinely couldn't do it. I was like, I'm just not, I can't. So
Mm,
yeah,
yeah. There's
mm,
a high percentage of women that just show up at work, while they're bleeding, presenteeism, whilst bleeding during the menstrual cycle. It's a really high percent. I think it's something like 80% of women that do this, just turn up. Or then the other side of that is taking medication, painkillers, which then also has a negative impact on their hormones. And so with endometriosis, I don't know if you know, but it's a systemic condition. The uterus is part of it, but you can have endometrial tissue, other parts of the body as
wow,
well. And so with women with endometriosis, you know, your immune system is kind of really challenged as a result of this added inflammation. So, for women who have endometriosis, from a nutritional standpoint, there is lots that you can do, and surgery, really should be the last thing. But supporting the immune system, reducing inflammation in the body is really key. And there's lots of symptoms that go along with it, like problems with anxiety, bloatedness,
right.
um, sort of mood problems as well. Trying to think what the other symptoms as well, fatigue. So endometriosis isn't just that bleeding as part. It has so many other facets. Is that a word? I don't know. Anyway, sounds good. Let's use that one. So many factors that actually also contribute to the the condition. And endometriosis also is very similar to an autoimmunity. So many women who have endometriosis also have sensitivities to other things as well, so like eczema, asthma, hay fever, that kind of thing. And
Wow.
so there's like a real link to autoimmune kind of responses due to having this condition. So, taking the uterus out, it doesn't really solve the problem. It helps you to not have heavy periods and the
Mhm.
painful periods, but it doesn't solve the problem. You still have this condition and it just doesn't go away post menopause or with menopause. You still have it. And inflammation is kind of the biggest risk for those women.
That is interesting. That's interesting, really interesting. Because sometimes, even now, because I am postmenopausal, but even prior, before that, and even now, there are sometimes I don't feel well. Um, and I've been to the GP and they cannot find anything. There isn't anything to hang what my symptoms are on, but always my inflammatory markers are high.
Yes, that's because you've got endometriosis.
Wow.
Yes. So the inflammatory marker is called C-reactive protein. I'm just saying, you obviously know, but I'm just saying it out loud for anybody that's watching this. Yes, that is a classic sign. And so what you need to do, because then that's a risk for cancer,
Okay.
because it's
Okay.
inflammation, is
Yeah.
reduce the inflammation that you have control over.
Right. Wow. I have learned something today. Absolutely. That really explains, because I was wondering, well, why am I having this, these high markers and nobody can tell me what's going on? And I've had this test done and that test done, but they're not picking up on that at all. Nobody's identifying and just leave you to kind of carry on. And it's like, well, I've got these, raised, you know, markers, but nothing's actually been done about it because I didn't know. I
No.
never knew that until now. And this is the thing, so many of us are walking around with all of these things, these high markers, and at risk of things like cancer.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
wonder, especially, people who, may be doing all the right things, but don't have, in terms of eating well, but I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I would want to ask you then, Pamela, is nutritionally,
Mm.
if people are eating relatively well, is there specific things that we can actually do then? Because, to reduce, I guess specifically targeting the endometriosis,
Yeah.
even
I mean,
after
I mean that's
hysterectomy.
like yeah, I mean that's like a really broad conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And as an individual, so, I as an individual, I look at you. So, yes, eating anti-inflammatory food. So, taking away the sugar, the alcohol, the processed foods, the chemicals, that in itself is where to start.
Right.
Then adding those anti-inflammatory foods like the ginger, the turmeric,
Yeah.
the cinnamon, thyme, rosemary, all those herbs, like how our
Yeah.
parents used to cook at the weekend, like Saturday soup, for example, with
Yeah.
thyme and lots of garlic and onion. So there's some foods that kind of really reduce, they're the foods actually that actually help to reduce inflammation. Apples, stewed apples, you could make a ginger and turmeric tea,
Right.
or ginger and turmeric and thyme soup with some onion in it. You know what I mean? They're the kind of things in terms of dosage, like use it like you would medication. So this is what I do with my ladies. We therapeutically add those nutrients in. So it's not just about eating those foods, it's therapeutically adding a
Right.
lot of those nutrients in to calm the nervous system down, to calm the inflammation down. And then when you talk about nutrition, eating white foods, well, yes, eating white foods are good, but we also want to make sure that you're absorbing those nutrients. And not everybody does absorb nutrients as well, particularly the older we get, our life stresses, just reduces our ability to break down nutrients and also absorb them. And so we need to make sure that you're absorbing those foods that you're eating, well. And then, from a lifestyle point of view, what toxicities are you using every day? What's in your cupboard? What are the creams and lotions that you're adding to your body, chemicals that you're adding to food, and then, what you can do to quieten down the nervous system,
Okay.
from added stresses, from external stresses as well.
Wow, that's so interesting. Thank you for that. And certainly, I'll be definitely be doing that and looking at that because nothing's changed because my inflammatory markers are still raised.
Yeah,
So
and they will continue to rise,
yeah,
and it is a marker for cancer, for
right,
sure. So
right. Thank you.
yeah.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, I'm thinking endometriosis and the medical model is, right, we've taken the uterus out, there you go, the problem doesn't exist anymore. No, the problem,
Mm,
not it's a problem because it's you, it's genetic.
right.
So that's why I was asking about your mom, your sisters, if you have any daughters as well. These sort of things follow through the family line. And it's good to kind of raise awareness that throughout your family because, what are your sisters' markers like as well,
Mhm. All
Uh,
three, my mom, myself, and my older sister, we've all had hysterectomies. I've got two younger sisters who've had issues, gynecological issues, but I've managed to, they've kind of resisted going down that road. Uh,
mm,
still issues, but
mm,
that is such an interesting thing because that is information that I can now share,
mm.
see how they go with that. But that's mind blowing actually. You think that the hysterectomy would solve everything, but it actually doesn't.
Well,
And
that's
what
because the
do
medical model is saying that the problem is the uterus. The
yeah,
problem isn't. So endometriosis is systemic. It's the
yes,
body, the
right.
whole body. And
Mm,
once you know that, that's then when you can actually start to
yeah,
manage it better.
lovely. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll definitely be sharing that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Wow.
So you're at work. You obviously now you're postmenopause from a very young age, surgical menopause. Did you take HRT or?
I certainly did to start with.
Yeah.
And because the hot flushes, the symptoms were so intense, and it
Mm,
did kick in early because I did have that surgical hysterectomy, and so I would be, sort of in class or having a meeting or something, speaking to someone, and it would be like someone has just flung a bucket of water in my face because it
mm,
would go, and I was so embarrassed, and I could feel it all down my back, and just hot.
mm,
And I would be embarrassed because people would be, having a conversation with somebody, and my
mm,
face is pouring, and I
mm,
would always have to apologize for that, and give an explanation as to why I was suddenly just sitting there pouring with sweat, and I did find that quite embarrassing, especially during meetings or in an interview or something like that, and it would happen.
mm,
Happened a lot. So I did start the HRT, but I was aware that I didn't want to be on it long term because I kind of understood what some of the risks to me were. So I would just, I mean, I was terrible. I was never that great at taking, even though I'm coming from a medical background, I was never that great at taking medication myself. So it would be a case of as soon as the symptoms went, I would just stop taking them. So I never took the HRT long term. It was literally, I'm feeling better now, so I'm not going to take them. Of course, the symptoms would just come back a few months down the line. So it was kind of this yo-yo thing that I had going on, but I didn't know what else I could do at the time. So I tried things like somebody told me about, is it red?
over.
Yes, I tried the red clover. There was something else that they tried. They told me to try, and I tried that as well. Didn't work for me. So
Mm.
it was every time I felt, I wasn't able to control this, I would just go on HRT until
Mm.
things died down. And that's how I managed it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
But
being a young woman as well, it's very different. I think having surgical menopause to a natural progression, I can't imagine what that's like. I feel that it's similar to when you are, you know, during that childbirth experience, whether you opt in for, to be induced or whether it's a natural progression, like to being induced, I imagine, because I didn't have to be, the pain starts straight away, you know,
absolutely.
whereas a natural childbirth experience is it's slow and you slowly build up to this and your body is able to adapt as accordingly. But so I kind of think that a surgical menopause is like wham, you are literally in it
Yeah.
that next day you wake up out of surgery. There's
Yeah.
no kind of slow transition, and that's over. I can imagine. Can't imagine. It's just completely.
Yeah. And it was interesting because it is, yeah, it was really, really intense. I mean, they left my ovaries just because they said that I would go instantly into menopause. So they left it so that, it would be a gradual process for me. That didn't work for me. It, I mean, maybe not exactly straight away. I maybe had a year,
Yeah,
and that was it. And so
yeah.
I'm 36 in the menopause. And I'm still, even now, and I'm 60, I'm still getting, it's not probably not as intense, and I can go for long periods now, but I will still have months where I can't sleep at night because it's really hot and I'm doing the whole hang your leg out of bed and quilt
Mm,
on, quilt off, the sweating.
mm,
And sometimes I wonder, is this menopause or should I be doing something else? Should I be looking for something else?
mm.
You
Well, that's
know?
interesting with the inflammation markers being high,
Yeah. Now
looking
that
at
you said that, yeah,
yeah, yeah. I feel like we're going into a consultation here that I don't want to. But yes, but something definitely. And so for postmenopausal women, um, you don't have to still have those hot flushes.
right.
Yeah. Even in perimenopause, there's things you can do from
Right.
lifestyle nutrition, definitely that can help
Yeah,
reduce those hot flushes. And it changes depending where you are as well along that journey as your hormones are changing.
yeah.
But I kind of want to move into them. So your role, what you do now in terms of the trauma work that you do,
Mm.
and we briefly touched on it at the beginning. But what kind of, so you were a nurse, um, and then what led you into doing what you do now?
Right. So what led me to doing what I do now, I started coaching based on an experience that I had. I realized I came to, something happened to me. I was in a very toxic relationship, and when that ended, I realized that actually most of my adult life I had been in toxic relationships, whether that was in the intimate relationship, whether that was at work, whether that was with friends. And I was like, what is going on here? What's going on? And I had to do the work. I had to get help for myself to be able to understand what this was about. And I realized what I came to learn and understand was that it was trauma. I was carrying trauma probably from a long time ago, but it wasn't necessarily anything major that had happened because I couldn't identify anything sort of in my childhood, let's say, that would have contributed to that. But there were situations and circumstances which did, because it wasn't something that I recognized as trauma, but
Mm,
it was other stuff that actually did erode some of my self-esteem, did kind of contribute to the people pleasing part of who I was. And that contributed to, future relationships, whether
mm,
that was a romantic one or in the workplace or even with friends. And it was something around being boundaried as well, and I wasn't, and that was because of things that had happened. And I think it was when I started doing the coaching work, it was that last experience for me And I was like, why did I do that? Why was I in that? How did I find myself? I'm an intelligent woman, I'd like to think, professional, I would never, working in, the environments that I'm working in.
Mm.
How then? And trauma is no respecter of persons. But all of us are affected by that. And I realized that when I did the research, had some help for myself, to try and overcome some of these things, I realized trauma has such a big part to play. So when I am working with women around helping them through toxic relationships, it's understanding how this trauma that they're experienced, that they have experienced, through whatever the relationship that they had, but also recognizing trauma from prior to that, even that's
Mm.
contributed to where they are now. And it's helping them to break that pattern. It's helping them to, it's not counseling. The way that I coach is it's not therapy, but it has a therapeutic element to it. So I'll use different modalities to help support that. And so we kind of look at some of the traumatic stuff, things that they've found traumatic, and we work with them, helping them with tools and strategies to be able to manage that, in order for them to move forward. Because a lot of times people are stuck, and they're stuck in that whole thing around self doubt, that thing around unworthiness. So those are the kind of things that I work with, and realized it was trauma. So it was doing a lot of work around that. But somehow it's kind of spilled out into, and I was always very much interested in trauma as that, if we can deal with that, healing in terms of emotional, our emotional health, our emotional intelligence,
Mm.
has a chance to progress. And it's that thing called post traumatic growth then, so that's what I want for my clients. And what I realized was that actually this is just bigger than, romantic relationships. It's bigger than, you know domestic abuse and narcissistic abuse. These are things that I'd experienced. It was even bigger than that. It spills out into every aspect of our life, every context of our life. Trauma impacts. And so for me, it was understanding that how can we heal? How can we, as a collective, how can we help each other? How can we help, the places that we go, like hospitals, social services, institutions, how can we support those that are hurting? So for me, it's about hurting. It's about looking at people in a different way. So for me, working in the NHS, when I see a patient, because I used to work in hepatology, so I would see a lot of people with addiction, hepatology. So I would see,
Blood. Is that blood?
no, that's
No.
where the liver. It's
Oh, right. Okay.
a lot of patients with liver disease, really advanced liver disease. A lot of the time they weren't coming back from that, and the addictions that was associated with that. And you'd see patients come in on a rotating door. So you
Yeah.
get them fit for discharge, then they're back in.
Mm.
We're not dealing with the trauma that's causing
Mm.
it to.
Mm.
And so for me, that was a huge thing.
Mm.
And then my work kind of expanded into looking at how organisations can support people better. And I believe, the government now, since COVID, I think they're recognising that trauma affects all of us. COVID, when that hit, changed everything. It changed everything. And I think there's that huge recognition now that trauma is real and that we have to address it. People's mental health are suffering. We know that the incidence of mental health is rising. We've
Mm.
got a real, we're looking at pandemic in the future of people suffering from mental health. If we can deal with that trauma, then we're partly going, we're partly helping, and I think, yeah, with working with organizations, there's kind of like almost like the six principles then that organizations and, yeah, businesses and all of that should, and the government recommends as well. So there's 6 principles. So one of them is am I all right to go through them, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, and it's not just within the NHS or social services, it's all institutions and organizations. So you've got safety. Safety is kind of number one. And so when we're working in these environments with people, we're looking at the whole context of a person's life, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional. They need to know that they're safe. When they come to you as an institution, people need to know that they're safe. Organizations need to make sure that their policies, and processes are trauma informed, so that, people can have, we don't want to be re-traumatizing people within the system. So there's been a lot of that. We need to make sure that, organizations are trustworthy. So we're looking at, again, policies. We're looking at staff explaining exactly what they are doing, when they're doing it, and partnering with and I'm talking from my health perspective.
Mm,
So people understand. You don't just come in and start doing stuff to people and you've not explained, why you're doing that. You've got to make it safe for them. So you do what you say you're going to do as well, is a really important one. Choice, giving people choice, that they partnering with you to be able to, get the best service that you can for them.
mm,
Collaborations, whether that's informal or not. You're helping people to be empowered. You're also looking, one of the things as well is looking at cultural considerations as well, that intersectionality between, gender, race, all of those things that needs to be addressed as well. So
mm,
looking at stereotype biases, when we talk about Black History Month, those things are really, really important. And recognizing that healing, and we need to be valuing, organizations and institutions need to value our traditional, values, our traditional cultural values as well. They have an impact on us, particularly people of colour. And I mean, if that's not recognised, that's going to be a trauma as well. So that's kind of a quick overview.
mm. No, that's so interesting, really. As you're talking and everything you're saying, it kind of sits along with this
Absolutely.
the menopause, and how we're changing that for
Yeah.
workplaces and organizations. It's definitely in alignment with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you finished on with representation, and that's really important in this conversation. Otherwise, like you said, it potentially is re-traumatizing people, not being seen, not being heard, not being recognized, and their cultural intersectionality um, components to them aren't being seen, heard, or recognized in the workplace. Yeah,
Absolutely.
very, very close. Really interesting. But what was your catalyst? What led you to do this from working in the NHS? Or did you start this in the NHS and then become self-employed as a result of that?
I there was two things. One was the breakdown of my relationship. I was feeling tired at work because I was like, I was on the front lines. I was tired. I was beginning to get tired. And then COVID hit, the
Ah,
George Floyd thing hit. And wow, that changed everything for me. That was a trauma. I mean, I remember watching that video that was going around and thinking,
mm,
what on earth have I
yeah.
just witnessed?
Yeah.
That I mean, that in itself was a trauma, and I know that it was a collective trauma for so
Mm,
many of us. And I remember being at work, and I went to work the next day, and I was thinking I could not get this out of my head, and I felt like, fortunately, I had a bit of a senior role, so I did not necessarily have to go onto the ward this day. It was a admin day, and I thought I can't go on the ward today, so I'm going to have an admin day. And I remember trying to print something off. I'd done some work and I was printing it off, and the printer was in the nurse's room. And I went in to collect the print. And one of the nurses in there said, "Oh, hello, Marcia, how are you? Are you all right?" And I just turned around and I said, "No, I'm not." And then the floodgates just opened, and I was crying. They were looking at me like I'd gone mad. They just didn't get it. And they were embarrassed, they didn't know what to say to me. But I was broken.
Mm.
And I had to leave work and was off for about about 6 weeks. And I don't think they quite got it, what was happening to me. But there was that was a trauma, and I could not carry on, and I had to
Mm.
remove from work for a time to just kind of try and process what was happening. And it wasn't just that; it was everything else, and it all just came into one big fireball. And I had to just take myself out of work. My doctor signed me off for a bit of time, and it was during that time that I decided I cannot go back. I have
Right.
to leave. I am going to do the things, and plus I'd been doing some work anyway, sort of the side hustle, working with community groups and whatever with women, and it just felt like that was the time. And I actually released a podcast during that time, and it was just sharing my own experience of that trauma, um, of being in a toxic relationship and not understanding what's just happened to me, uh,
Mm.
not understanding, yeah, not understanding the whole cycle of
Mm.
years. And it was that was all of that was the catalyst. And when that podcast went out, I remember the day that I was releasing it, and I posted it in all the safe places, but not on my own personal profile. And I remember the coach that I had that was helping me put all of this, the podcast together. She says, "Marcia, why have you not posted that on your Facebook page?" She was, "Come on, girl, share, share, share." I remember her saying that, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so exposing." And anyway, I picked up the courage and I just pressed the send button. I'm like, "Oh, it's too late now. I can't pull it back." And within minutes, that it was a trailer for the podcast that went out. Before the day was out, I must have had 1,000 views and lots of shares, reshares, reposts, and people just commenting and sending me private messages saying, "Marcy, this is my experience, and thank you for sharing." And it was just, I could breathe. And it was then that I decided that a lot of my work that I was doing was kind of coaching, but I
Mm.
wanted to be able to have a framework to be able to work properly so that I could support women better. And that's when I went off and did my training to become a coach. And I just kind of went into this trauma informed. And I don't think I had a name for it necessarily right at the beginning, but that's kind of what I was doing. It was as I was researching and I'm thinking, that's what it is. I'm having to
Mm.
look at things from a
Mm.
trauma lens, uh,
Mm.
before it became a thing in terms of, organizations and the government really coming on board with it. But that's how it started for me. And it's
Mm.
just this whole thing around health, because that's my background, health
Mm.
inequalities. And for me, that was the connection.
Mm. Mm.
Health
Yeah.
equity.
Sorry.
No, I'm just talking about health equity and all of those things. It just kind of enmeshed it for me. Yeah. So that's kind
Yeah.
of where it's.
I mean, I'm so glad that you are raising awareness around trauma, the big T's and small T's, because, particularly when we talk around the menopause, there's this idea that you can just fix it with hormones.
Mm.
And there was an article from Dame Kelly Holmes by
Okay.
The Guardian talking about insomnia, how she's struggling with insomnia, and she's, openly talked about it on her Instagram page as well. Not sure if she's perimenopausal or postmenopausal, I'm not quite sure. But and then she's done a recent ITV documentary about her trauma from childhood and then also being in the army, and how she's literally held that trauma inside her for all these years. And she's telling her story. And this is why, for me, I don't really like conventional therapy, because it is re-traumatizing as you're living through telling the story again. And you know, the work that I do around trauma is very much around the unconscious mind and
Mm,
in the child work. Yeah. And so you're not then reliving the trauma. And you know, on the article, they talk about HRT being the solution. Well, actually, no amount of HRT is going to get rid of trauma. Like
yeah,
that is just ridiculous, you know.
yeah, yeah.
And when we look at our bodies as women, we're not just hormones. There's all
Mm,
these there's all these things that, like I said at the beginning, that have impacted our bodies by the time we get to, not like you, but most of us in our 40s and 50s, as the hormones are changing, then those traumas can destabilize our bodies. I did video on here and on my other social media channels where I'm talking about Jenga. And
mm,
if you move one Jenga block, that's a life challenge that you've experienced. And when you get to the perimenopause and menopause, that is what then destabilizes that female body. And
mm,
then to repair that or to rebuild that healing is to do one block at a time. And
right.
that includes trauma response that you're
Absolutely.
going to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and that is so so important for for women, for us to know, not just women but everyone to know that, particularly around trauma being held in the body and
Yeah.
how that manifests into all kinds of physical um, illnesses. When we
Yeah.
relate it to, there was something that you said actually around the menopause, and it was around, and I never recognized it because I actually still, it still happens for me whenever, but I didn't. You'd think I would, but I didn't. I didn't make the connection. The insomnia. So
Mm.
when that happens, and even this past week, I've had the sweats, and I was thinking I should be on the other side of this now. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you was that, particularly as this is Black History Month,
Mm.
Black women having menopause, whether it's the normal go through stage or whether it's surgical, that it's
Mhm.
more intense and lasts a lot
Mm.
longer. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I don't it's American study and it's an
Right.
old study and it's not, in my opinion, I don't think we have the research. You know, I've been working with women for 8 years now,
Mm,
and of those Black women, there's like a really low percent of women that enter menopause earlier in terms of that
mm,
natural thing, a really small amount. And what do we call worse?
mm.
What is a worse menopause? Is it
Right,
is it a dry vagina? Is it having hot flushes? Is it having brain fog? Is it having anxiety? What is worse? It's subjective.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So
But
if it's subjective, then that we can't say that a race
mm,
has this.
okay. Yeah. Interesting. It's really interesting. And I think because I'd heard this for so long, and because I'm still, because I started my menopause journey in my mid to late 30s, and it
Mm.
still feels like it's still part of me now. But having heard some of the things that you were saying, I wondered whether that was part and parcel of just Black woman's lot, that it lasts longer, but also whether, oh, what was I going to say? See, menopause brain. There was that, and also this whole thing around trauma and how we hold that in our bodies, and how that might manifest in terms of menopause. And you talked about Dame um,
Kelly Holmes.
Kelly
Yeah,
Holmes talking
yeah.
about childhood traumas. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that in terms of coaching and the kind of coaching that I do, it's not a therapy, but it is a therapeutic approach. And I think that's really important, that women understand that we do carry trauma, and doing that whole damping down of the nervous system. If we're holding this trauma, that in itself can manifest in other things, making our symptoms worse, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah, definitely. But like you said, everybody has trauma,
Mm,
some bigger than others. And epigenetically, you know,
right.
there's also the amazing stuff that we have too.
Yeah.
All the trauma, it's not just the trauma. There's the other side of that.
Mm,
And going back to, being a postmenopausal woman and experiencing symptoms, that is due to the hormones that you no longer have in the same
mm,
way. But that's also due to being overweight, having
mm.
inflammation markers, having insulin that's out of control and blood sugar instabilities because you are postmenopause. But they're all things that you can manage when you
Yeah.
know how. They are
Yeah.
really, and I know that because I do that with my clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to kind of just finish off with you. Just what are your parting words if anybody's listening or watching the replay?
Okay. My parting words is this: that, help. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to, yeah, you do not have to suffer with the symptoms of menopause, um, in a way that's going to be traumatizing for you. And I think it's really about seeking the help, because the help is available. And one of the things that I would say as well, just listening to you, Pamela, and having a different perspective on things. One of the things that you did say, um, in terms of the endometriosis, that there's more to learn. And I think it's about educating yourself. Seek out people who, like yourself, who can truly help you to move forward, because I think I personally need to do that, specifically around menopause for myself as well. So my parting word is, you don't have to suffer. There is help available, and take it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, wise words. So I'm just going to share our book. So if anybody hasn't got our book yet, it's called Black and Menopausal. Well, I was a contributor in that. And also, I have created some recipes that are African Caribbean influenced foods, but also with other nutrients from sort of Western, I guess, that really marry together that to support hormones and reduce inflammation. So I'll put that in the chat as well. So anybody that wants to buy that. And so tomorrow, my guest is on Instagram with Dawn Heals, and she is a fibroid advocate, and I'm really excited to be talking to Dawn tomorrow. So that's at 8 o'clock tomorrow night on my Instagram channel. So thank you very much there, Marcia. It's been
Thank
an amazing
you.
conversation. Thank you for anybody that's listening and watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.